Podcasting between Leeds and London, Interesting Podcast is your indispensable guide to the more interesting things in life. Your hosts are about to take you on a journey through all that they find interesting, curious, helpful, and downright bizarre. And now, here are your hosts, Matt and Rick.
Hello, it's us, we're back, and this is episode 3 of Interesting Podcast. Firstly, on behalf of myself, I'd like to say a massive thank you to everybody that's listened to the podcast so far. We've had a lot of people get in touch and tell us how great they think it is and give us suggestions and ideas for what they'd like to see in the future. And also, we've had quite a lot of discussion with people about some of the things we've talked about. Matt's blonde date has been a particular highlight so far. We hoped that we'd be able to send out a podcast every week. Now, we know there's been a little bit of a delay. We've had some hosting issues, as in we've had to push iTunes quite hard for them to understand that our podcast is interesting, but you will be pleased to know that it is now available to download on iTunes. We would be really grateful if you could take a moment to log on to iTunes, find the podcast and rate and review it. And you can also add it to any kind of podcast feeds that you have, RSS feeds, etc. So, today we're back. What we'd like to talk about today is time.
Yeah, I like the concept of time. What time is. Everybody's looking for time, trying to find time. I don't know where they're hiding it. They're running out of time. And I do think that, as the world's progressing, we're making labour-saving and time-saving devices. And I think it's time that we all just slow down a little bit. So we're going to be talking about time in general, what it is, and time management. Well, as you said, before we get into the time management, we have had some reviews from America. We've gotten a lot of people listening in America who find our accents quite interesting, which we think not only interesting, what was that?
Let me read you JP Webster's review. He says, 2 guys speaking in British accents makes everything a bit more interesting. As an American, I've always had a fascination with the Brits. They sort of speak like us, they sort of look like us, and yet they have a nationalised healthcare and no guns. It's like a crazy alternate universe that I am equally scared of and fascinated by. This podcast is like having a hidden mic on 2 of their species. It's not so interesting as it is fascinating.
Well, there you go. Excellent. Thank you very much. So if you've got a review, please add it onto iTunes. We're very easy to find on there. Just search for Interesting Podcast. But today, the subject of today is time. And we have an interview coming up with a gentleman called Tom Evans, who Rick's actually reviewed his product. I believe it's called Bending Time. And so Rick's going to be interviewing him, and then we're going to be speaking about that afterwards. But time management, I'm very much into time management. I believe it's one of the kind of the cornerstones of self-esteem and getting things done. Actually, the more you plan, the more you do, because I've actually been in an event organisation for many years. I used to run band nights, networking events, obviously now run interesting talks. I also work with private clients, and I work at several different companies. So I have to make sure that my time is managed correctly. I actually use Google Calendars. That's my preferred method. And then I use to-do lists. How do you manage your time, Rick?
Well, there's one thing I'd like to say firstly, and the expression time management, it annoys me a little bit because time is a constant. Time doesn't change. You can't manage time. Time cannot be managed. What you can manage is yourself. So when we talk about time management, what we actually mean is self-management. And I, like you, am big into this. I mean, I look at time management more from kind of a management point of view and a kind of work-based point of view. Yeah. There are a number of techniques I have used, and I do agree with you that planning is absolutely the way forward. But I've used things like, I've used the app Remember the Milk, which is a great way of coordinating your to-do activity. activities. I've read a few books on time management. I mean, notable ones are Getting Things Done by David Allen, I think is one of the first, which is really good in terms of how you list everything and then you make sure you know what your next action is. Yeah. And I think in order to manage a task or complete it successfully, what you need to do is know exactly what is required, and then know what your next action is. What's the next thing I must do to get nearer to the goal?
Yeah, no, I agree. Actually having tangible small tasks to do, because, every big task is just, a lot of small tasks, which then you put into a sequence, what has to happen logically. And that's like when I was 21, 22, I used to run these big band nights that, 4 bands, so like up to 14, 15 people, band members, and then 2 technical staff of 2 or 3, 2 door staff. We then used to have a DJ, and then I had 3 bar staff and somebody doing the door, like taking the money. And then 200 or 300 people, who turned up. And I managed the whole thing simply by doing tick lists and time management. And so I know how important it is to know what has to happen. And basically, I'm a big, big fan of tick lists or, checklists. And it's how I run my life now. It's like, like I say, I use Google Calendars, but I have things that repeat monthly and weekly and annually. And I think that you're right in saying it's not about managing time, it's about managing yourself. And when you manage yourself, you're not worrying as much and you seem to have more time. Because I know everything's going to get paid on time, everything's going to get done. So I'm less stressed because I know things are going to get done because it's in my system.
And I think, to add to that as well, I think a lot of the reason that time gets wasted isn't so much about time. It's partly to do with planning, but I think it's about focus. And I think that sometimes when given a big task to do or a lot of work to do or a big project, people panic. And this, university students get this all the time when it's writing essays. You have an essay to write and you think, oh my God. And I was very much a last minute kind of person. I mean, there's something called Parkinson's theory, which is the theory that a job of work will expand to fill the time available for its completion. So that if you only have 3 hours to write an essay, you will write that essay in 3 hours. Yes. But now with hindsight, what I would do, and I realise now that human beings, certainly when it comes to writing, but a lot of creative, everything creative, we have this inherent need to create and edit at the same time. Now, what we should do is create first and then edit later. And this is why, there's another book called Accidental Genius, which talks about how you would write a book. And basically it advocates that what you do is you start writing. You just start writing and you do not stop writing until you've reached a certain time period. I think one that's used quite a lot is 25 minutes. So you keep writing for 25 minutes, then you put it in a drawer and forget about it until the next day, where you come back and then you review it and edit it for another 25 minutes, and in a combined time of 50 minutes you've got more done than you would have done in 3 hours if you'd have started to write and think, well, what's the right word for this, how do I say that, and you're writing one word at a time rather than one paragraph at a time.
And is that the Pomodoro technique in 25 minutes?
Well, I was referring there to a book called Accidental Genius, which is about writing, but the Pomodoro technique is very similar. Pomodoro, of course, is Italian for tomato, and that was named after the guy that invented it had a tomato-shaped kitchen timer. And what he says is that you set it for 25 minutes, you do 25 minutes focused work, then you have a 5-minute break. You then do it again, do 25 minutes focus work, and then have a 5-minute break. And then after 4 of those segments, you then take a longer break, I think of about 20 minutes. And I find the Pomodoro technique is really useful in my work, because what I try to do, I have a desk job really, a lot of the time, it's at a desk. And I personally believe that email is the biggest killer of productivity in the workplace today. Yeah, and so the first thing I do when I get into work is I plan what I'm going to do that day. Yeah. The second thing I do is do the piece of work that I think is most complicated or that it will involve the most period of time. And without checking my email, without looking at anything else, I will have 25 minutes focused on that piece of work.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, so I think sort of planning your time, knowing what you're going to do, and I think that by finding time or using your time effectively, this is why, this gentleman, Tom Evans, actually got in contact with us because he's produced a product called Bending Time. He contacted us because he responded to our call of, we want free stuff. And so he gave us access to his website. It's an online training product which you reviewed. You actually went through the training. You actually went through the modules, didn't you? And you've actually spoken to him about it.
Yeah. Well, I think what we'll do, I did go through the modules. I haven't yet finished, incidentally. I'm still part way through, but I think it's a good opportunity to talk about it. Let's speak to Tom, and I'll come back and tell you what I found afterwards.
Let's bring him on.
And now on Interesting Podcast, I'm here with Tom Evans. Tom Evans is an author, a writer's unblocker, and a wizard of light bulb moments. Welcome to Interesting Podcast, Tom.
Oh, it's a great honour to be here, Rick.
So what do you mean, a wizard of light bulb moments?
Well, I wrote a book about 2 years ago called The Art and Science of Light Bulb Moments, and people started calling me it. So I kind of resisted for a while. But eventually on my website, tomevans.co, I put it as my strapline. And 2 weeks ago, there was a blog about the weirdest job titles on LinkedIn. And I came in at number 4 and I went, hey, I must have landed. So it's a moniker that's stuck. But it does describe what I do. Any environment I go into, I help people generate light bulb moments and also help them ground them so they make them happen so they don't get away.
So what does that look like then, generating a light bulb moment? What do you mean by that?
Well, what you're going to do, the book actually describes it. It's in two halves, the art and science. The art of it is the state you get into when you have one. Most people think that they're random and they come in sort of when you're not paying attention. Mm-hmm. But it's very easy to actually generate them by getting into a certain meditative type state. And the driver behind them, of course, is the breath. And the word inspiration kind of gives you a clue as to what powers light bulb moments. And when you get into a certain state, you get into this timeless state. They kind of just drop in.
Okay, and so is it easy to teach this to everybody?
Yeah, I've got about 5 different techniques which generate them. Mind mapping, meditation, sledgehammer techniques that Edison used to use. So just invent. I use the intention. I always intend that serendipity is going to come in. And also collaborating, this idea that 1 and 1 makes 3. So you and I sat down over a pint. We'd sort of come up with all these different ideas that each of us might have, and then together they could form new pseudo ideas that are better than the sum of the parts.
Excellent. So who are the kind of people that you work with these techniques then?
I work with authors, so use light bulb moments to get the most perfect book titles. I've worked with entrepreneurs and innovators on business ideas, and often what happens there is that someone comes up with a great light bulb moment, but it's the spin-off that actually is the thing that really makes them successful. So I work a lot with mind mapping techniques to generate spin-off ideas. I work with, funny enough, with teachers and with students as well. So it's great for coming up with ideas in an educational kind of setting. But
okay, no, that's really interesting, Tom. I mean, that was the book you wrote, The Art and Science of Light Bulb Moments. But I'd like to talk to you about another one of your products. This is called Bending Time.
Yeah.
Now, can you tell me a little bit about what this is?
Okay, well, it is a spin-off from the light bulb moment. You could call it a light bulb moment from the Book of Light Bulb Moments, which is self-feeding in a way. But
a sub-idea.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been very good at writing very quickly, and I noticed in my own output how in about an hour, when I get into the zone, I could generate sort of 2,000-3,000 words. And also, it's pretty good writing as well. It only needs a bit of a proofread before it makes the final book. So I kind of studied the state I got into, and I started teaching other people to do it. And I found that it was something that could be taught. And you know when you're in the zone and everything else just flows, it's how you get into that zone, stay in the zone, and actually generate fantastic output. And it kind of it just morphed, and it arrived about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I put it up on the internet with hardly any marketing, and people started downloading it. I've been really pleased with the take up for it.
So it's a brand new product, pretty much. Then 2 weeks,
yeah,
2 weeks live.
Yeah, and unlike other time management techniques, a lot of them focus on getting rid of interruptions, doing a nice sort of prioritized list. This one is fundamentally different. What it does is teaches you how you can change the speed of your consciousness so the perceived passage of time is different.
Okay, what's that like then?
Well, if you've ever been in a doctor's waiting room, you've gone through all the magazines and you got nothing else to read.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those minutes, don't they? They stretch into hours. Yeah?
Absolutely, they do.
And likewise, you can go on a weekend with all your mates, and all of a sudden Monday comes around. Yeah. So time isn't as fixed as we think. It's actually completely related to speed of consciousness. So, for example, ask a fly what the time is, ask an elephant what the time is, and I guarantee if you could speak to them, they would have a different perception of time as us human beings. And I noticed that some people seem to think slow and other people seem to think fast. So we all have a different perception of time. I'm sure you've driven somewhere perhaps and you were late, but somehow you just managed to get there exactly on the minute.
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah, all of these things are examples of how time and consciousness are interrelated.
Well, this is like Parkinson's theory, isn't it? That a job of work will expand to fill the time available for its completion.
Yeah.
Which was kind of the philosophy I adopted at university when writing essays, because I was a 3 hour before the deadline kind of guy. But then my total time expenditure was just 3 hours. So in the end, I think I won.
Yeah, exactly. I'd agree with that principle. And also they say, don't they, if you want a job done, give it to a busy person.
Absolutely, that's true. So that's a little bit about what bending time does. What actually is it? I mean, what is your product, and how long does it take to go through?
All right, so it's 4 modules. It's over 3.5 hours of audio visualizations, 4 workbooks spread over each of the modules. The first module you might not expect to see in a time management program. It deals with blocks and it deals with goal setting. Because if you're thinking about the past or you're worried about the future, that takes your attention away from the now. Now, the normal human mind can only have one thought at a time. But as you see as you go through the program, one of the things I do in the very last module is teach people how to do 2 thought streams at the same time, a little trick that a shaman taught me one day. So module 1 is all about getting rid of blocks that might hold you back and getting rid and setting fantastic goals. And I do this thing called learning-based goal setting, not target-based goal setting, which is it just generates some fantastic results. Module 2 is all about the subjectivity of time, and it takes you into different states of consciousness where you actually do experience what it's like to have time going slow, time going fast, and even time stopping as well. And then at the very end of module 2, I show you how to do all of this with your eyes open, so you can actually get into that state. Module 3, talk about left and right brain, and it's an urban myth that the left brain is logical and the right brain is creative. What it looks like, and this has been kind of corroborated by latest neurological research, is the left brain sits inside space and time, and the right brain sits everywhere and everywhen else. So if you get the left and right brain working on the same thing at the same time, your output increases about 400-500%. And then finally, module 4 is when we really have a lot of fun. That's where I teach people how to have light bulb moments on demand, how different parts of your body run at different speeds. So, your gut mind is 5 seconds ahead of your conscious mind, which is why your gut is always right and shouldn't be ignored. And then I do another little shaman's trick at the very end and show you how to send messages back to yourself in time.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's an awful lot to go through. 4 modules and you cram all of that in.
Yeah, so it'd take you about 2 or 3 weeks to go through it in a nice, relaxed manner. But there's nothing to stop you sitting down and just listening to it all the way through in about half a day, and then coming back and diving into different bits of it.
Well, I'm going to give some of this a go, Tom. I'm going to try some of these modules and come back and report on how I found it. I hope we can speak to you again in a week or two to to talk about some of those experiences. And I also hope that that we will be able to get you as a guest on Interesting Talks in the future, the group that's run by Matt, so that you can come and tell us more about your light bulb moments.
Yeah, so we can do light bulb moments on demand, and also we can do group time manipulation. When you get into a group environment and you all shift, I can teach people how to see through the veil of illusion of time.
Wow.
Big stuff.
I can't even imagine what that looks like. I haven't got a point of reference for what that might be.
Well, I'll tell you, just in 30 seconds, I'll tell you how it happened. I went on a past life regression course, and on the very first day, we were working in pairs, and the person in front of me disappeared. You know those sort of Pirates of the Caribbean movies where all the flesh disappears and the skull appears?
Right, okay.
This person kind of disappeared, and I saw all their past lives stacked up on them. And I started researching this, and I met loads of other people that could do it too, and I found out that it's not actually just something at random. Then I did a workshop myself last year, and I taught people how to do it, and I've done it to in a group of like 35 people where they've all seen through the veil of illusion, and it's quite magical. And it's obviously something which is innate in every single human being. So I'm thrilled to pass the secrets on.
Well, excellent, and the secret you shall pass on. Tom, thanks for taking the time to speak to us.
Great,
I'm sure we'll speak to you again soon.
I hope so. You take care.
Thanks, Tom. Bye.
Bye.
So that was Rick speaking with Tom Evans there, and his product is Bending Time. That sounded like a really interesting approach towards time management, obviously to do with the whole kind of meditation and slowing time down, essentially. So what did you think of the product then, Rick?
Well, before I talk about the product, I'd like to tell you a story, and this is an absolutely true story. I in earlier life trained to be a manager, and I've been on a number of kind of management training courses, and I've worked with a number of people who are really good at learning and development and kind of personal effectiveness. And I once, in one of my past jobs, worked with a guy called Bernie Mudge. You know, Bernie was a good friend of mine as well as a great trainer. And he did a personal assessment on me. And we had a conversation where he was talking to me about the way people view time. And some people look backwards. Some people are very stuck in, very in the present. And some people are very forward focused. And now the way I view things is I'm constantly about what's next, what's coming around the corner, what's happening in the future. And what Bernie said to me is that I would do very, very well to spend some time thinking about maintaining myself in the present. And he recommended to me that I would either, go to a Buddhist center and do some courses on meditation, or even some basic breathing courses, and just learn how to relax and how to enjoy time in the moment. And this was always really, really, really good advice, and something that I absolutely intended to do. And what I really liked about Bending Time is that Tom sells this product about how you can manipulate and bend time. Well, obviously that's not possible, but actually it is. Because what his whole product is about, there are 4 modules to it. It's an audio series, and he works through what he calls visualizations, which I think that they're almost like guided meditations, where he will talk through some basic meditative techniques, some basic kind of concepts of how our minds view time, and encourage you to slow down your thoughts and to really, really appreciate the here and now. Now, admittedly, I haven't completed all 4 modules yet. I haven't completed the 4th module. But certainly, module 2 about how you actually relax time in your head was absolutely brilliant. And I will use it again. And I will certainly go back to it and repeat some of those visualizations.
Yeah, no, it sounds really good. And obviously, I understand the benefits of meditation. Obviously, I'm a trained hypnotherapist, so I understand how beneficial it is to slow things down, because time is often tied in with your anxiety levels. When you're anxious, things are sped up. Your body is sped up. So rather than sort of bending time, it's almost kind of bending your perception of time, and bending. When you slow down, the world kind of slows down, I suppose. And but just one thing which I found really interesting, people's perception of time. Because, I'm originally from, up in North Yorkshire, where things are slow. And now I live in, London, where things are much, much faster. And the perception of time in London is quite strange. I was on the tube yesterday, and I was waiting just on the tube. It stopped for a minute or so. I didn't mind. I was reading Rip It Up by Richard Wiseman, which we'll review in a couple of weeks. And I'm quite happy. If a train gets delayed, I can't do anything about it. But this guy, he was getting so frustrated that he actually got off the train. And I was thinking, why did you get off the tube? Where do you need to go that's that important, and how are you going to get there any faster? So I do think sort of meditation, and when I'm on the tube, if I ever get flustered or, if I start to get panicky, that's not going to help. That's not going to change the outcome. And I do think that having a good meditation practice and being what we call present. A friend of mine, Shamash Aladina, wrote Mindfulness for Dummies, or the Dummies Guide for Mindfulness. Sorry, and that's what it is. It's about focusing on what you're doing, because I think that these days we are so distracted with Twitter and Facebook and phone calls, and you know what I mean. There's so much distraction that we're trying to do so much and not really doing anything of it that well. And that's why I think sort of like the Buddhist approach of doing a very simple task but spending a lot of time on it and actually physically doing something, but actually really slowing it down. I think that even if you are a busy person, by doing, like those Airfix models or something along those lines, where you have to just concentrate and do one simple task, really just slow down your heart rate and makes you relax, and getting into sort of the meditation. Because I think, with meditation, the other thing is sleep, and how important sleep is. What's your sleep cycle like, and how do you sort of rate your sleep?
Well, I used to be a really heavy sleeper, and now I'm becoming in later life more of a morning person, I suppose. I tend to get up a lot earlier now, and I kind of, because I work quite regular hours, I have a reasonably regular sleep pattern. But what is really interesting about sleep is, I actually have something called mild sleep apnea. It's not a real problem, but it does mean that every now and then I do stop breathing in my sleep just for a short period of time. And it worried Steph more than my girlfriend Steph more than it worried me. So I did go and see a doctor about it, and I had sleep tests done where they monitored everything in the sleep, and it turns out that that sometimes, because I do stop breathing, I wake up, which means sometimes my sleep quality is poor. But the thing is about sleep is that the bit of sleep that's quality is where you go into the rapid eye movement stage, so that when you're in the REM. Now, most people have what's called monophasic sleep, which is one kind of stint of sleep, where it varies from person to person, but I think broadly speaking, they acknowledge that it's kind of 7 hours or upwards. But there is a school of thought that has been tried and tested, which is called polyphasic sleep. Now, there are various approaches to this, but the theory is that you have a short amount of sleep, almost like a nap, at regular, frequent intervals. So some techniques will advocate, say, half an hour every 4 hours. And if you work out kind of in a 24-hour period how much sleep that actually gives you, it would give you, kind of 6 half-an-hour stints. It would give you a total of kind of 3 hours sleep. But actually, because you have more REM, it's a greater total of quality sleep throughout the 24-hour period than monophasic sleepers.
So you sleep for 30 minutes every 4 hours?
Well, the numbers, I can't exactly remember how many it is, but yes, that's what it is. So you would go to bed at midnight, wake up at half midnight, then, work on through till kind of 4:30, and then have another half sleep 5, and you take the half an hour naps, spaced throughout the day.
Would you be able to almost do 4 half an hour on, half an hour off. For like, would that work?
What do you mean?
So you sleep for half an hour, then you get up and are awake for half an hour, then sleep for half an hour, get up and wake for half an hour, and do that for 8 hours.
No, and I think the whole point, and now I'm no expert, and maybe we should speak to somebody who is, but I think the whole point is that by spacing it out regularly, you're at a sufficient but kind of consistent level of tiredness so that you can easily fall asleep into the half an hour, and then you get the quality REM straight away. Whereas I think if you tried to space or mess around with the routine, what that would mean is it would affect your ability to get into and out of that quality half an hour sleep. I will say as well, there are alternative approaches. I mean, I read one that the US military use where you have a decent chunk of sleep of about 4 hours, and then you take kind of 3 45-minute naps spaced throughout the day. I mean, the whole point here is that there are different ways of sleeping than we currently use.
I like my sleep. I do like my sleep. And also, I do like my guided meditation, and something which we'll speak about in a future podcast is binaural beats. I personally don't think I would be able to do a system like that, because when I go to bed, I'm not going to get up after half an hour. I'll have a half an hour nap during the day, no problem. I'll do that several times. I'll do that today. But I don't see me doing it off and on for a kind of quite a prolonged period of time. But Rick, do you have anything else to add? Because we are coming close on our time today, but a massive thank you to Tom Evans. It sounds like a cracking product, and something which I'll have to give a listen to when I find time, because I'm actually going through some of Andrew Austin's products at the moment. So,
well, just one thing from me. I mean, we've spoken about meditation here, and I've never really, explored this as a field. And what I would look for is if anybody's got any recommendations for either any audio courses that are kind of intros to guided meditations, or any kind of any breathing or meditation courses or experiences they've had where they've been away or been to a camp or that kind of thing. I'd be really interested to learn where you went and how that went and what it was like. So I'm thinking of doing something like that.
Excellent. No, that sounds really cool. And if they could make that free for us, that'd be even better.
Obviously.
Okay, Rick, if people want to get hold of us, how can they get hold of us? Where can they find us?
Well, they can email myself at rick@interestingpodcast.com.
They can email me at Matt, which is MATT, at interestingpodcast.com.
You can tweet us at interestingpod.
And you can also like us on Facebook. You can just go to our fan page, which is Interesting Podcast, facebook.com/Interesting Podcast. And finally, you can also find us on iTunes or go directly to the website, which is interestingpodcast.com. That's good night from me.
And good night from me.
Thanks for listening to Interesting Podcast with Matt and Rick. Obviously, any views expressed herein are those of the hosts and no one else. If you like what you just heard, please share the website www.interestingpodcast.com with your friends, family and colleagues. You can subscribe, listen to the archive podcasts and get in touch. Do you have something interesting to say? We'd love to hear from you. Get in touch. Tweet us at InterestingPod and like our Interesting Podcast Facebook page. Until next time.